Thank you for coming. My name is George Belinsky. I work in Human Resources. We have Cynthia Halligan, who works in Comp Class and Human Resources as well. We're here to run through the exempt status and non-exempt status, what changed and why. So as we know, with the functional realignment, as well as the Federal Labor Standards Act changing, we have all these positions and employment statuses changing effective July 1. So today we're going to run through what the Fair Labor Standards Act is and the changes that are coming down the road for us. The purpose of its changes, some of the overtime procedures that will change, or not so much change as just be more relevant to more employees on campus. Monthly leave reports for folks who have never seen them or filled them out. Some folks actually here probably sign them for their employees, but may have to complete them in the future, and then have some time for questions. So what is the Fair Labor Standards Act? So this is a federal law that governs whether or not employees receive overtime pay, amongst other things. The Department of Labor several years ago was tasked revising, updating, looking at those standards, those minimums, as well as the duties to update them to get current. They had not been updated in quite some time, and some of those dollar amounts were quite out of date at that point. It took them several different missed deadlines to finally come out with what the actual regulation changed to. They finally came out during late May with what the final minimum salaries are, as well as some guidance on duties and other specialty occupation rules and regulations as far as who could be exempt and non-exempt. So as we put the presentation together, they hadn't released those things. We've been talking about this for a year, and it finally came out in May. They did come out actually in May, and they gave us until December 31st, 2016 to be in compliance with those regulations. Since we're going through our functional realignment, our changes, we are still shooting for our July 1 timeframe to be compliant with those new rules. We have been marching to those anticipated deadlines for the entire year, so we're going to stick with that change. Comparison of the current versus our proposed changes for the FSLA. Since 2004, it had been a minimum of $455 a week or $23,660 a year. So that's a pretty low standard for someone who's exempt that is required to work 40 or more hours. So that standard had been pretty low and pretty outdated. The proposed or the changes that they had put out in place were 5440. When they came actually into effect, they settled on 4760 as a final salary for that number. I'm going to let Cynthia go through how she classifies positions as far as who's exempt and non-exempt as far as a salary and duties test with this next couple of slides.
So the first part of the test has to be a salary. You have to make a certain dollar amount. First, you have to be paid salary, and everybody at Ames is actually paid salary. You get an annual base that's then divided out by 12 months, and that's what your monthly pay is. So whether you're exempt or non-exempt at Ames, if you're a full-time employee, you are paid salary. So that's one of the first guidelines, I guess is the way to put it. The next thing is the dollar amount. So the new dollar amount is the $47,476, so $47,746. So you have to at least make that exemption first. If you don't make that amount of money, you're automatically non-exempt. The next test that comes in is the duties test. And so an executive is somebody who manages more than 2 people, and they are the signature authority supervisor. The next would be administrative. That's employees performing office work. It's not somebody in an assembly line. It is somebody who is supporting the company. They are not the ones making the money for the company. They're doing a supportive administrative role. Or they could be professional or creative. That's a professional would be highly trained in a certain area, or creative. You are designing websites, you are designing the look or the brand or the feel for the organization, but it is definitely a creative. We all have a little bit of creativity in our jobs, but this is real creativity type pieces where you're having to design an entire computer program. You're having to do things that are of creative nature. A computer professional is somebody who is designing, so if you could be creative as a website designer, or you could be a computer professional as a website designer, depending on what you're needing to design and how you're needing to do it. Computer designers are designing databases, other types of things that where it's a little bit of that creative, but having to have a lot of knowledge in computers. Or outside sales, and that's not sitting at a desk doing calls, that's actually out in the world trying to get sales for your organization. Not something that we really have here too much at Ames. And so if they meet, and there's a whole list of duty tests that I have to go through on these exemptions to find them. If they meet that, then they move forward to the next piece. If that's not met, then it's automatically non-exempt. The next piece over is then we look at the job duties just a little bit more, make sure that everything is jiving, that it's feeling good, because we do not want to lose our exemption. If you do a missed class on exemption, you can lose your exemption status for the entire organization. So it's something that we take very seriously, and we have to make sure it's done correctly. So that's kind of what I'm doing when I look at that to see, and it's based on the classification, not the position, because we have to think about refilling that position and what does it look like. So if the classification is exempt, all positions in that classification are exempt as well. So we're looking at that type when we're going through it. So exempt or non-exempt, what does this mean for me? So at this point, you should have had a conversation with your supervisor. You should know whether your position is moving exempt or non-exempt starting on July 1. So if you haven't had that conversation, make sure you have that conversation with them. Come over and talk to us in HR if you're still having some concerns with that and not really sure what you need to do. You're not exchanging, that doesn't change your status in pay. You're going to be paid the exact same dollar amount. Unless you're doing overtime, then you're going to be making more money, so that's always good, right? And as a non-exempt employee, you need to submit your monthly time report, which we'll get into a little bit more. It's an Excel spreadsheet. It's not that, it's not that scary. You'll be able to figure it out pretty easily. So. The leave accruals. So a lot of people are asking, well, as an exempt employee, I accrue more leave than a non-exempt employee, if you look at the policies and procedures. We will be grandfathering you into it. You will continue to accrue the same amount of vacation. That's the only one that's really affected. You will accrue the same amount of vacation as you did previously. And that's literally, if you start it on June 30th of this month, you will be considered, you will get that leave. So that's the cutoff date. As long as you are here at Ames working on June 30th, you will get that exempt leave, and that will go forward with you. However, if you choose to interview for another position and move to another position, you will lose that leave accrual if that is a non-exempt position. Non-exempt employees are exempt for comp time or overtime. We cannot dictate whether you take comp time or overtime. That's something that you get to decide as an employee. Comp time is 1.5 hours. Needs to be used within 60 days of the time of accruing the comp time. Or you can get overtime, which is the payout. All these changes are effective July 1, which we've been stating quite a few times, so you guys should know that by now. But this is going to take effect on July 1. And we just love this slide, so we put it in. So how did we come up with this? Did we take a dart and just start throwing darts and decide what we were going to do with it? What we ended up doing was we looked at all the classifications, and any of the MINs that were above the 50-50, the 50,000, 50-50, we looked at that because that was the dollar amount everybody was proposing. So we started there. And anything that was making above that stayed exempt. Anything that went below that went non-exempt. We were playing it very safe at that point, and that's how we wanted to go ahead and do it. So that's where we're at. We did kind of adjust a little bit to the 47.6. So there might be a little bit of changes in some things that you'll be hearing about. We are still vetting those changes. We're still making sure that this is the correct decision for the organization. We are looking into some other things, talking with Mountain States about it to make sure that that's really the right choice, because in 3 years, they're going to move it again. And so we have to think about that in the future, and that means that we're going to have to move things again in 3 years, and we're like, is it better to just stay where we're at, because then we're a bit ahead of the curve. So there's a lot of considerations that we're taking right now. We also identified any kind of wage compression issues that came. That's part of why we looked at the MINs, so we didn't have to worry so much about compression, because that's the start, that's where we're at. If somebody leaves and comes in, we know we're good to go. So we don't have to worry about that part. We reviewed the organizational structure, made sure that we weren't making any changes that were going to have any more effects on any part of the organization. We really looked at it for quite a few months and looked at it from a lot of different ways, but those are some of the different criteria we used when we were looking at it.
I think it's one of the important things that Cynthia's already mentioned, when sometimes people in the room are looking at it and saying, I had that discussion, my position's going non-exempt, but I make more than that. It is not the person, it's the position we have to look at. So it's that classification, everybody in it, and where its mins are. So that if somebody left a position that had been there, we have people with some really amazing tenures that had been in that position for 15 years. They might make significantly above it, but if we refilled them tomorrow, the entry-level starting position of that would be below those thresholds. That's where we have to look at it, so we don't have two people in the same jobs with different classifications, as well as the problems that would cause. So we had to look at the positions and the classifications, not the people who are in it. And it was easy to get distracted sometimes by saying, well, that person makes well over 50. Again, the position mins are where we have to target and what we look for.
And like he was saying, the classification is determined before a person comes into the position. So we really are looking at the classification and the position, not the person who's in it. Because there are quite a few people who have been here for many, many years and are definitely making plenty of money to be exempt. But if we have to refill that position, what are we going to have to pay? So that's kind of where. So switching from, the one thing you need to think about switching from a non-exempt employee to an exempt employee is 40 hours, you're done. You don't answer the phone when you go home. You don't give people out your cell phone number and start using your cell phone after hours. You don't do emails after hours. You need to be, and it can be hard. There are days when I'm like, oh, I just want to get these couple other things done. I know that department is really counting on me. They need that other position in there. I really want to stay just 5 more minutes and do it. I have to turn my computer off and I have to leave. I am a non-exempt employee. I can only work 40 hours without any getting approval. And it's a really hard thing to do sometimes because it's like my heart's there. I really want to help that department, but I have to walk out. I have to turn my computer off and I have to leave. So that's going to be the biggest, I think, culture change and the biggest issue for people who are going from exempt to non-exempt is to realize it's 40 hours and you're done. So, and that can be really hard to turn it off and walk away from work. So. And that, that technology, it helps with, I can just log on to my AIMS and look up my email real quick. No, you can't really need to do that. You really need to turn it off. When you go home, spend time with your families, have a great time, you enjoy your life. This can help give you a little bit more. For me, I use it so that I can have more life balance because I'm a workaholic, and so it's better for me to have that work-life balance, and it forces me to have it a lot more. So you can start enjoying that part of your life. You can do flex schedules. So a flex schedule is, let's say you have a daycare issue and you can't drop your child off until 8 o'clock in the morning and we start at 7:30. But you can pick your child up later on that day. You can then flex your schedule. It can be a permanent flex of all summer hours. I start at 8 o'clock and I work until 6 o'clock, or I take a 30-minute lunch and I work till 5:30. You have to mandate at least a 30-minute, the Colorado state law is a 30-minute lunch break is a mandatory after 5 hours of work. Here at AIMS, the culture is we like you to take an hour lunch break. So if you have that statement of I'm coming to work at 8 o'clock, I'm going to take a 30-minute lunch break, and then I'm going to be here till 5:30 and leave. So that would then be my 9-hour day in the summer. And you need to put that in writing with your supervisor, sign it, send a copy over to us to put into your personnel file. So it's now set up every summer. This is what it is until you send another letter over to HR. The reason why we ask that you make it in writing and you put it that way is, what if your supervisor changes? In the middle of the summer, your supervisor leaves, you get a new supervisor, and now you can go to them and you can say, hey, look, I had this agreement with my old supervisor. This is how it's set up. This is how I would prefer to keep it going. And 9 times out of 10, that supervisor should take that information from you and go ahead and go with it. But that way I've already set it up. This is what's going. This is where it's headed. And we keep that copy in your personnel file. So if you ever need it, just give us a call. We can send you over a copy so you have it. But that's why we ask that it's in writing, so that way you've already decided on the contract for the summer, you know what's happening. If it's just a 1 week, I need to flex my schedule this week because my son got in trouble with the principal and I have to go have a meeting with him. So you know, I gotta flex my schedule this week, I don't wanna take time off, I wanna flex my schedule. It's have that conversation with your supervisor. I prefer to do mine when I have to do that in email so that it's a documented email to that supervisor. I send an email to Dee and say, hey, son got in trouble with the principal, I need to leave a few minutes earlier this week. I'm gonna leave early on Tuesday by 30 minutes, I'm gonna make that 30 minutes up on Thursday. And then you set the plan of how you're gonna make that up. It's all written out, everybody agrees, everybody knows. So that way, that's just flexing it during the week. Any other questions on flex time?
The form that you can use as a guideline, we actually developed it in HR because some of our employees in HR use that flexible schedule. We put it on the HR website as a guideline you can use. So I see supervisors in the audience. So if you have an employee that you already have that sort of informal standing agreement with them, we've heard from other folks across campus who've been doing that the whole time, then it's just a way to make sure you document a consistent practice. Because flexible schedules or flexing your time doesn't mean I couldn't make it here at 7:30 today, but I'm going to stay late, and maybe I come in early tomorrow, but then I'm late again on Thursday. That's not a flexible schedule. No supervisor likes that sort of process. It means that, like Cynthia said, I drop my child off at 8 o'clock. I'm here by 8:30. I work a half hour later in the day to make up for that time on a regular, consistent basis, and I stick to it, and I'm kind of held to that schedule with my supervisor since we both sat down and agreed to it in writing. So we put that form of guidelines on the HR website for usage out there. And then there is that, I have a doctor's appointment, I'm going to make it up by working a little bit extra each day during the week to leave early on that one day. But those are usually the one-time occurrences, just something that pops up during the week that you handle with your supervisor or your supervisor handles with their employees on an exception basis. But vast majority of folks are expected to be here during their department's normal working hours. Now some areas have different normal working hours. We put 8 to 5 because that's just the standard business for the entire college, but we know the cashier has, their office has extended hours to be there for students. So their normal working hours are a little bit different than other areas. And I'm sure there's other departments on campus that have exceptions as well. So well, that's two different ways to try to help that. Yes, Cheryl.
I have a question going backwards for a minute to the compliance issues.
Sure.
I have an employee that helps me manage the D2L server, and we never know at any given time what issues could occur.
Absolutely.
And so going back to the 8 to 5, no cell phone tracking hours, volunteering, if an instance occurs, and I'll be the one on call because I'm the exempt employee, but if I need to call on him to assist because he knows the ticketing system, et cetera, better than I do, how do I manage that as a manager?
Absolutely.
If there's I have to rely on him to help me support that, and that's one of my concerns about his role, because he's actually, and his pay is actually above that main salary.
Sure.
So I have some concerns around that.
That's a great question about on-call type of duties. So some of the IT professionals, even some of our facilities and maintenance folks, they're not exempt, from salary as well as duties, are on call. So it's a situation that we deal with all the time at Ames. It's not new or unique. However, if you establish they're on call, then if you call him up and ask for services, you're going to pay him for that time. So if you have to call him and say, I need you to come to campus, get the server up, or even do it remotely, any time spent doing that will be considered as, depending on how many hours they work in the week, that could be considered overtime or comp time, unless you modify their schedule so that, I called you last night, you put in 2 hours of work, I'd like you to take 2 hours off early on Friday, so they still worked 40 hours in that week, so you could flex it that way. But you'll be on the hook to pay for that on-call type of process.
Do I have to identify the on-call status in advance? Because that's one of those situations I'm never going to know.
It's going to depend. So with our facilities operations, some of them are required to be within X distance of the campus or respond time, and they get some form of compensation for that requirement. So that means they can't leave for the weekend, they can't go for the mountains. If they get a call, they have to respond within 20 minutes. So if we have a flood, a pipe breaks, something like that happens, there's a compensation piece for that, whether you utilize it or not, versus calling them up and having them fix something on a one-time shot. So I think the best thing to do is to work with Cynthia on understanding on-call policies and procedures for staff members. But it's nothing new. We do it with it all the time. And understanding that we fully understand, we probably should have prefaced our presentation with, these aren't Ames rules. These are the federal governments. We have tons of people in the audience who deal with federal guidelines, federal mandates every day, with financial aid, with aviation, with accounting principles, you name it. We follow those standards, and this is what we're having to follow per the federal guidelines. So again, that person might be over the minimums, but that position's minimums aren't. So if you refilled it, the classification, we wouldn't meet at that standard. So you can't have two different people in the same class with different statuses, those type of things. So we do understand this is a burden for campus. You know, I see other people on campus from first year experience. I know there's nights, I know there's weekends that you're volunteering with your groups and other activities. We understand it's going to either cost, you know, Ames as an organization, overtime and comp time, or flexible schedules, or it might show a need for additional staffing in certain areas that we can't fill those roles. We're responding and following what the guidelines are. We didn't come up with these on our own. Rest assured, we are following because we have to, and it increases the burden for everybody on campus, as well as the number of people who have monthly time reports and time accounting that we have to go through with HR and payroll as well. So it definitely is going to change how we apply certain things and do things for our students here on campus. And you know, we're going to try to minimize that impact to our student services, obviously, but we understand it's going to cause some discomfort until we adjust to it.
Right. So lunch break is mandatory, as I'd said a minute ago. The Colorado state law, or actually federal state law, is 30-minute lunch break after 5 hours of work. That is mandatory. And it is away from your desk, not doing any work. I mean, you know, it is take that 30 minutes, go away. And I'm just as guilty as anyone else. I live in Windsor now, so I like to bring my lunch. I like to sit at my desk, and I like to eat my lunch. So Ames has an hour lunch break. That's what our standard is. So in an HR department, we follow that standard. I have an hour lunch. So I come in when my door goes closed at 11:30, at 11 o'clock. I take my brunch break from 11 to 12. My door goes closed at 11 o'clock. I don't answer my phone. I don't answer the door. There is nothing that happens outside of that room. Sometimes I'll go walk around campus. I try not to have too many conversations. It happens, you know. But I take that hour. Now, if I start violating that, my supervisor D is going to take that away from me. She's going to say, nope. You got to go off campus because you're answering your phone, you're doing work. This is not what you're supposed to be doing. So I take it very seriously when I close that door. I eat my lunch. I bring in my own computer even, and I might do some of my homework. I might do something else on my computer, you know, but I am not doing anything remotely related to my job. So that's how you have to take it very seriously. And as a supervisor, if you see somebody sitting there eating their lunch and working, you know, let's not, I mean, I understand you run errands. Sometimes I go run errands and then I'm back and I'm eating lunch. You know, that's fine. You know, you can do that type of stuff, but you need to make sure that at minimum 30 minutes, you are taking a break, you are leaving, you are going and doing something else. We all need to do that. It's a good health benefit. It's a good work way to be. It's a good de-stressor in the middle of the time of the day. You know, get out, go walk around campus, go do something for an hour, for 30 minutes. But it's a good thing to decompress and unwind for a little bit in the middle of your day. So not only is it mandatory, it's really a good thing to do for yourself. It helps with work-life balance and that types of things as well. So, but it is a mandatory 30 minutes. Flex guidelines. So we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier. There is a request form. Supervisors do need to approve the flex time prior to it happening. It's not an excuse for being tardy. It's not any of those types of things that George mentioned earlier. It needs to be a pre-planned thing. Now, things can happen. You can have your car break down on the way to work. You can have other things happen where you have to flex. I was purchasing a house. My car broke down on the way to closing, so closing took a little bit longer than expected. So I flexed my time later on that week. I did adjust my time a little bit and say, well, I really needed to get into work. I needed to do some work versus taking some more vacation time or leave time using that. I instead flexed my schedule for that week because it took me a little bit of half an hour, 45 minutes to get back to campus more than needed. So there are some times when it is acceptable, but it's pre-planned is what you need to be thinking about with that flex time. Life happens, of course, but it's more of the pre-planned and set up. So comp time. So you can take overtime or comp time. You can be paid for overtime or comp time. Overtime does need to be proved, and before, or the comp time does need to be proved prior to. With a minimum of your supervisor. If you're getting paid currently, that needs to have president approval. I know we are working through the approval process and changing a few of those things. We are still working all of that out. So continue to talk with your supervisor about what that looks like, so you know in the coming months. But comp time does need to be used within 60 days of occurring the comp time. It is 1.5 hours for every hour that you worked. And you will mark that on your time card and move it forward through the 2 months if need be. Any comp time in excess of 60 hours or not taken within the 60-day limit will be paid out in the next pay period. So it's not use it or lose it, is you will get paid for it. We cannot have you work and not pay you for your work. That is just the way it goes. So.
Historically, comp time has been kind of managed by our departments. We really need to make sure on those monthly time reports that come in now that comp time is tracked on there so we can keep a better eye on it, so that we're managing it at the HR and payroll level as well as the departmental activity. So just make sure that if your employees, or if you are the employee with it on your leave report, that it is totaling up there correctly. And it is, like Cynthia said, it's earned after hours worked over 40. So if you had sick or vacation or a holiday during the week, you physically have to work over 40 before you're eligible for overtime or comp time. Those other non-work times don't add to the computation of comp time or time worked. So.
Overtime. So it's anything over a 40-hour week or 12 hours in a work day. I can't imagine too many people at Ames actually working more than 12 hours in a day, but it might happen in some high peak times of different things. But that's when, so 40 hours in a week. So if you have 8 hours of holiday during that week, you can't count those 8 hours you have to physically work the 40 hours in order to start getting overtime. And once, like it says there, the overtime approval process is still under review. We're still working through everything. We're vetting everything, making sure it's all exactly where it needs to be. And so we're not violating any rules on that. Because if we do violate the exemption, like I said, everybody becomes non-exempt. So that's everybody from the president to the part-time worker who works 10 hours. And that can be very costly to the organization. So we do not want that to happen.
So at this point in the presentation, we're going to go to monthly time reporting for our non-exempt employees and how to complete a monthly time report. The instructions are attached with the leave report on an Excel spreadsheet. It is a kind of a locked Excel spreadsheet that's really pretty easy to fill out. It takes a little bit to get used to it, but it's not that complicated. We probably have a revision or two we're going to do with it to keep the nomenclature as far as V for vacation or A for annual leave, because they're mixed up and used interchangeably where they shouldn't be, to keep everybody straight. So you can find this under the My Ames employee tab under forms, and you'd submit it to us monthly. So I'll have a screenshot of that form here shortly, but you put your name on it, you put your Ames ID. You know, once you put your name, your Ames ID, your division, all those things, then you just save it and you just repopulate it each month. So you only have to do it one time, and then you just fill in for the months that change on there. You're going to enter the date reporting range. So this is where it throws people off just a little bit, and it did me as well when I filled them out. So we always go from the 15th of the previous month to the 14th of the current month. So 5/15, 15, 16 through 6/14, 16. And this might be not the best example, because June we actually do one for the 15th through the 30th of June due to our fiscal year end, our year end roll. So vast majority of all the other months will go from the 15th through the 14th, and that's how we submit them. Now what makes it a little bit confusing is we are always paid current. So we get paid at the end of this month for this month's work. However, for our monthly time report, there is a 2-week arrears or lag period, since we need time over in human resources and payroll to process these forms, do our data entry, adjust the leave accruals and balances, and process a payroll. That's why we have that cutoff of trying to get those leave reforms into human resources by usually the 16th or 17th of the month. That gives us time to, total them all up, get them for payroll. Payroll enters them all into Banner and has to submit their payroll 5 days before payday. So that gives us that time to correct it. So we're always paid current, but our leave usage is basically 2 weeks behind. That work week up there, that's where you're going to adjust the work week that encompasses that 15th of the month. So our work week here at Ames runs Saturday through Friday. So that throws most people off as well, and it threw me off consistently for some time because your desk calendar won't run Saturday through Friday. So your desk calendar runs Sunday through Saturday or Monday through Sunday. So for Ames, our work week starts Saturday and ends on Friday. So when you're entering those first dates in that first column, regardless of, it might be the 13th, but the 15th during that week is where we want to start it. So you'll put the 13th, but your first day worked, you'll see here, it's 13 January. However, the 15th was Monday, so that's where we started entering time. So put the week in there by whatever calendar days it falls for encompassing that first day of our leave period, the 15th of that month. That's probably confusing. Once you do it once or twice, it makes sense. And then we'll enter in the hours worked on the first row and then the hours that are leave or other hours on the row below it. So we'll put 8 hours for each day we work. If it was more than 8, we'd put more than 8 in there. That way it'll carry over and computate for the compensation time or overtime usage. You put the other leave hours according to the legend below. A for annual, P for personal, H for holiday, S for sick time in there. If it's somebody who's out on FML, we do ask that they put, sick as well as FML, because the sick will tell us what type of pay to take, and the FML will tell us to record that time for their usage of FML. The hours worked should all carry over and compute in the other columns over in the leave usage as well as total hours worked. It's fairly simple, but it just takes a little bit of practice to get used to how they work. And I think what we have is the A for annual. Banner shows it as vacation. So we will make it match Banner on this form for you guys. We'll get that changed on the internet to make sure that when you pull it up, we use them interchangeably in HR. Annual and vacation is the same thing, but it is confusing outside of there. So we'll make sure it has vacation on there. So again, work hours on the top row, non-work hours below that with whatever code it might be. It should total them all up for usage throughout the month. We do them once a month. We put in the daily when they're due to HR for submittal. So you'll want to make sure you get them completed. Just double check to make sure they're all correct. Have your supervisor sign it. Just send it over to us in campus mail. Again, overtime is accrued whenever hours are worked over 40 or 12 hours in a day. If we don't have sick or holiday or vacation in there, they don't add up for it. I guess that's an important last sentence there. Again, if somebody is working from home or on email or on cell phones after hours, that is considered time worked. So it's something that's different. Many Ames employees respond to my emails at all the times of the day. I might send them something during the business hours, but I'll get responses at 7 or 8 o'clock at night, and it'll say sent from my Apple phone or whatever, iPhone or whatever it is. So for non-exempt employees, it is going to be difficult to turn those devices off, turn that mobile access off, and not respond to those things until the next business day. So you as a supervisor, if you're getting responses from your employees after hours, you're going to have to talk to them and say, you can't do that. That's time worked. Or if it's something you pre-approved, maybe there's a project you have to get done and you've got the pre-approval for overtime or comp time, or you've worked out some flexible schedule and they need to work on it later, then that'll be okay. But otherwise, you don't want them responding to your phone calls and your emails after hours. That's considered time worked, after July 1 for people who have changed. And those devices are going to make it much more challenging for us, as well as everybody across the country who's an employer and in higher ed as well. So it's going to make it very challenging to turn off the smartphones. Yes? Correct. So the question is, what if I receive an email on vacation? My easy answer is you shouldn't be checking your email on vacation. You're on vacation. So you're going to have to ignore those work emails. Or if you take the time and respond to it because you believed you should have, then you're going to have to take one less hour of vacation or whatever time it took to respond to that action item out of the time usage. So instead of using 40 hours of vacation for that week, you put in for 39. But your supervisor should not have the expectation, or whoever emailed you, that you'd respond to that when they got their out of office email saying, I'm out of the office this week, please see another member in accounting if you have questions. So that should be the thing that tells them, I'm not going to get a response from Sandy, I better ask somebody else. Absolutely.
It's very important to make sure you have those out of office emails, out of office on your phone, so people realize and who they can go and talk to. That's one of the key things of being a non-exempt employee, is make sure that you have those turned on so that can get taken care of.
Absolutely. Again, through the monthly time report is where we adjust all our leave balances, and then when we process leave at the end of the month, that's where they all adjudicate and they earn your time as well as any deductions happen there. Miranda McFarling really is the expert in the leave reports monthly. She's the one that you've been sending them to since last September, so she can answer any questions or problems, or what day did this period start, what's the Saturday date, what's the ending date, what leave code should I use for this. I had to take bereavement leave and then some additional vacation. What code should I use? She can answer all those questions for you. I like that, Landon. If you're out, don't tap the app. Absolutely. Absolutely, that's perfect.
Another suggestion, anybody who uses the Google app on your phone, you can set up the quiet hours so that from like 5 p.m. to 7 a.m. it doesn't sync to actually send those emails. You actually have to go in and do that.
Thank you, Angela. Angela said there is on Google app a quiet hour setting where it won't alert you if your supervisor is emailing you during off hours. I like that. Other questions? Again, all our changes will take place July 1st. You should have been talked to by your supervisor if your position was going to change. So you're fairly safe if you haven't had that conversation one-on-one that said, your position is going to non-exempt after July 1, that is staying as is. We are reviewing with the new laws a certain small number of positions to see if we can keep them as exempt employees. We haven't settled that yet. We want to make sure we're in full compliance with the law. We're seeking additional legal counsel to make sure we're interpreting the rules and regulations correctly, as we never want to go totally alone when we have resources for those things. And if you have questions, Cynthia Halligan for compensation classification, and then Miranda for time reporting. Thanks.